Hi, good afternoon. Today I'm going to speak about what we all about in Atsas farm, which is regenerating environments while creating high quality products. So I call the presentation the case for regenerative agriculture, because our house is burning. We are in a terrible, terrible situation. The climate change is going out of control. This year, again, we broke every single record of temperature, ice melting, etc., etc. And the main reason behind that is our food supply. It generates between 40 and 60% of all carbon emissions and destroys our environment, destroys our biodiversity, and with doing that, destroy all the services that are provided by our environments. So I'm just going to show you quickly just the scale of what is today industrial agriculture and how destructive it is. We wasting about 35 to 40% of all the food which is produced. So we can easily feed everyone on the planet with the system we have now. But if we keep doing this system, we're going to undergo radical changes that is going to destroy the livelihood of the majority of the people on the planet. We've been poisoning our waters, our soils, and our bodies. Everyone in this room has glyphosate in his urine, I'm 100% sure. Glyphosate being a toxic herbicide, which is that causes cancers. And it's everywhere in our environment, and it's not going anywhere. It's like DDT back in the 50s, which is illegal now. It's still in our environment, it's still in our water, it's still in our rain. We're putting poison and products into our environment that is not going anywhere and is cycling into our water and to our food supply. So we're spraying our food with chemicals that we're not supposed to breathe, but it's okay to eat them. Climate change today is going completely out of control. I've been doing this type of job since 15 years now, and I remember that back in the day our objective was 350 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. We passed 410 last year. We're going to pass 420 this year. So every year we're reaching higher and higher level, and we are just waiting for a catastrophe to happen and to pass the tipping point. And there's a big debate that whether or not we already passed that tipping point. The ice is melting. This winter, in the North Pole, we had 0 degrees Celsius. The average on winter in the North Pole is between -50 and -40. So we were 40 degrees above the average in the North Pole. What happens is it melts the ice, and when the ice melts, it changes all the oceanic currents. This is what will happen if only 30% of the glaciers in Antarctica and Arctica will melt. And that's just for Europe. Most of population on the planet lives by the sea. We're talking really huge displacement of water, of people. We can barely deal with a few million refugees from Syria. Imagine what will happen to our countries when we'll have to deal with hundreds of millions of climate refugees. It's coming, and it's coming fast. Our oceans are becoming deserts with the rise of CO2 in the atmosphere. the CO2 goes back to the ocean. It's the biggest carbon absorption is made by the ocean. And it turns into bicarbonate, which basically destroys the calcium. And by destroying the calcium, we're basically destroying all the shells, all the corals, and all this. That creates coral bleaching. And this is what we've seen in one lifetime. In 2005, I was living in Australia, and I was working on the Great Barrier Reef. I was diving every day there. And my son, when he's going to be in age to dive, will never see it. It's one of the greatest environmental monuments on the planet, and it's almost completely destroyed now. And in 10 years, when you'll be able to dive, it won't be there anymore. This year, we passed a new tipping point, the Gulf Stream, which is the ocean stream that goes from North Pole all the way down to the east coast of America and then goes back up to the west coast of Europe. The Gulf Stream is the main reason why we don't have -40 in the winter in Europe, because Paris and Montreal are on the same latitude. The only difference is that warmth that comes from that current. The Gulf Stream this year stopped. It was predicted to stop in 1,500 years. It stopped this year. Every single prediction by climate analysts has been overcome. We lost 80% in the last 27 years of our insect biomass, the total of insects. 90% of the reason is the insecticides that we use in agriculture. It's very easy to realize this. Just remember when you were driving a car 20 years ago, what was happening to your windshield. You know, your car was covered in bugs. Now you can drive at night with your lights on, your car will be clean. We lost 80% of the biomass. When we lose the small organism of an ecosystem, then we have a chain reaction where the whole ecosystem collapses. Today we had a great news. The European Union forbid 3 pesticides, neonicotinoids, but that's not enough. We have to restore our ecosystem. We have to regenerate our biodiversity, because without that, we lose all the services provided by it, which is basically clean water, clean soil, clean food, healthy people. Of course, when you lose insects, you lose birds. That's just one example of the house sparrow in the UK. Population decline. We're in a catastrophic situation when it comes to bird population. The main driven behind this, it's the way we eat food and the way we produce food. Agriculture uses the most fossil fuels. Most of the pesticides and the fertilizer are byproduct of fossil fuels. It's the main use of water. It's the main source of pollution. It's the main source of destruction. We lose our soils due to our agriculture practices. We lose our soil, and we've been losing them since the beginning of agriculture. Agriculture started about 30,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. At the time, it was called the Fertile Crescent. You know, we're talking Iraq, Jordan, Persia, and just look at it now. It's basically a desert. All those deserts are man-made deserts. It's 30,000 years of mismanagement of the land. We came, we till, we cut the trees, we turn the soil, we destroy the soil, we destroy the biology in the soil, and while we do that, we destroy the capacity of the soil to hold moisture and to stay in place, and then we have wind and rain erosion. We have been creating desert everywhere we've been. 75 billions of topsoil which is lost every year. And this data is quite old, it's about 6 years old. Everything increases. The good news is that we have solutions, and the solutions are very simple. We can restore environments, we can restore ecosystems. We have to go beyond conservation and to go through regeneration. Regenerative agriculture is what we do in Atsas. Many people are doing it now in the world. It's showing incredible results. It's the only way we can survive as a species on this planet. It describes farming and grazing practices that reverse climate change by rebuilding soil organic matter and degrade soil biodiversity, resulting in both carbon drawdown and improving the water cycle. So how do we do it? It's very simple. We observe nature, we look at how nature works, and we're trying to speed up these processes to our own advantage. So we're using design, we're observing natural patterns, we're observing how soil is created in nature, how biology helps improving soil, plant, fertility, etc. And we are designing, putting elements in place so this can happen on a much faster scale than it happens in the natural world. We do not till. This is the fundamental of regenerative agriculture. Tilling is always wrong, and it's been proven many times over by many studies that no-till in every crop production, from annual vegetables to perennial trees, etc., it's always superior. We don't create soil erosion. We increase the organic matter into the soil, and this organic matter into the soil will raise fertility and will hold water. It's also, a huge carbon sink. We have the possibility of reversing climate change by storing the carbon where it belongs, in plant matter and into the soil. We're doing the opposite of traditional agriculture. Traditional agriculture is a degenerative agriculture. We're doing the opposite. Instead of releasing carbon and losing water, we are storing carbon and we are storing water. It's the solution for climate change, it's a solution for drought. We can restore hydrological cycles by reforesting, by replanting, by having constant ground cover. We increase the evaporation of the plant. We can create rain by regenerating environments. It's also far less machine intensive. We use much smaller tractors, and we use far less frequency of the use of the machineries. So it's much cheaper instead of in terms of fossil fuels and machines and all this. The main problem we have in agriculture is subsidized, that are usually placed in the wrong settings. In Europe, we have huge subsidized agriculture. If you buy a big tractor, the European Union will give you 50, 60, 70, 80%. We have a neighbor that have 200 goats and 5 tractors. So he's in debt. He's stealing the ground like everyone else because the European Union gives you money if you prove that you're exploiting land. So they're tilling ground which are not suitable for farming, rocks, mountains, places where they will not plant. They just till it all. So then aerial picture will show that they are cultivating this land, and then for a few €100, they will keep tilling and tilling and tilling until the whole place becomes a desert. In Cyprus, it's 51% of the country which is in critical state of desertification. And once again, the main reason behind that is agriculture. The meat industry is one of the biggest carbon emitter. It's one of the biggest pollution emitter. We have removed animals from the system and put them in the feedlots and little place. We've been growing their food in another place, usually in South America and Africa, with soy, cereals and all this. And so we've been completely separating the animals from their environment. All our grasslands, all our prairies have been evolving for millions of years with big animals or smaller animals that were grazing on it. Grasses, Graminae, all the grasses that we have been evolving for millions of years to be eaten by animals. So if you remove animals from a system, you create catastrophe. You create what the meat industry is creating. But we do need animals in our system. If everyone goes vegan tomorrow, we will still have degenerative landscape. We just need to look at how nature works, how the animals are grazing in nature, and we have to mimic this to regenerate ecosystems. And when it comes to meat production, milk production, we need to put the animals back where they belong, in the grasslands, in the prairies, and we need to graze them just like nature does. And in nature, you have big herds of animals that moved really, really fast into the system, into the landscape, in compact setting because of predators, because of their behavior. So when they do that, they eat everything, and then they move really quickly into the landscape. All the manure, all their hoofs are changing the soil a little bit, and everything is concentrated. So you can regenerate landscape using animals. And we need animals into our systems. There's an amazing man called Alan Savory, which is based in South Africa. And he's been a pioneer of that work, which we call holistic management or holistic grazing. And he's been regenerating thousands and thousands and thousands of hectares using animals, using beef, cattle, goats, sheep, and all this. If we leave the sheep and the goats like we do in Cyprus, it's not overgrazing, it's mismanagement of the grazing. We need to find a way through proper shepherding and proper way to move the herds into the landscape to mimic nature. And if we do that, we do the opposite effect. We can regenerate the grass, we can regenerate the landscape. So all we do really is not really rocket science. All we do is observing natural patterns and just, speeding them up. So what we have to understand is how nature works when it comes to soil and the way plants are growing. In nature, plants are growing in symbiotic with trillions of microorganisms. Our body grows in symbiotics with trillions of microorganisms. It's the same thing. We don't get our food directly, the vitamins, the nutriment, directly from what we eat. It's bacteria and other microorganisms in our guts that are getting it for us. It's a symbiotic relationship. We all live in symbiotic relationship with microorganisms. In nature, every plant lives in symbiotic relationship. It's a huge trade. When we use chemical fertilizers, it's basically salts, nitrogen, phosphor, potassium, the three main elements, and sometimes we add magnesium, calcium, copper, whatever deficiency we see. When we use that, we dilute it in water, and the plant doesn't have a choice but to drink it. And it's basically like if we were on a drip with a concentrate of protein, fat, and sugar. We will grow, we'll be alive, but we'll have no immune system, and eventually we'll get sick, and then we need medicines, etc., etc. when we grow plants this way, it's the same way. We grow plants, they do grow, but they get sick. They don't have an immune system, they get insects, pests, etc., etc. Then we need to spray, then we need to add more things, then we have deficiencies, then we have salt into our soils, then we till over it, and then we create a desert. The plant, in a natural environment, gets carbon from the photosynthesis, so it takes carbon from the air, the C from CO2. The majority of this carbon is made into little sugars that we call exudate. Some of it is used for the growth of the plant. Depends on the plant, it's between 10 and 20% only. It's used for the growth of the plant. The rest, 80%, goes into the root system to feed the soil, to feed the microorganism in the soil. So if the plant needs calcium, it will make a little sugar, a little exudate, that will bring, with a special recipe, that will bring the microorganism that brings calcium to the plant. If it needs magnesium, it will make another one and do another trade with another one. So if you want to have a plant which is nutritious, and this is the key behind our polyphenol content in Atsas, is that our trees have access to the entire supermarket of the soil. The microorganisms are here. We have a rich soil, which is building and building and building every year, and we see our polyphenol content is increasing every year because we have more and more microorganisms, we have more and more diversity, and diversity brings stability. And plants have the possibility of teaming or making deals, trade, with a much larger population of microorganisms. The picture you see there, it's one of the most common symbiotic. This one is with a fungi. We call it the mycorrhizae fungi. It's very, very deep symbiotic because the fungi actually goes into the cells of the root system of the tree and will extend the root system. It will bring water, nutriment, and it will also be used as a means of communication. The trees are communicating with each other through this fungal network. This is the original internet. It helps the tree to pass information when there's pests. The tree will send information to the other trees really, really fast through chemical signals for the other tree to get ready to synthesize a natural reaction to the pest, a natural chemical for the pest not to come on the tree. We have shown also that the trees are also communicating with other plant species. So these plant species that are exudating their own sugars can also trade those sugars with other plants. So it's not only microorganisms, it's also sugars and exudate and all this. All this increases the organic matter content in the soil. Organic matter content in the soil is basically carbon. So we are storing the carbon of the atmosphere. So instead of releasing carbon, which we do in industrial agriculture, we're doing the right opposite. We're storing carbon. And when we store carbon, we increase the capacity of the soil to hold water. And this is where we want the water into our soils. So it's a very, very complex food web with millions and millions of microorganisms. We know very, very little of it. In soil biology, the first serious study started in 2012 by the French Agriculture Research Institute, just to put names on these guys. We don't even know their function. It's the most complex ecosystem on the planet, it's under our feet. We know very little of it, very, very little of it. And the more we learn, the more we are astonished by the level of symbiotics and trades that happens in there. So because we know very little of it, we go for a very simple natural principle, which is that diversity brings stability, that we know that principle. So we just follow that principle, and we are trying to bring as much biology as possible into our soil. And the benefits of this complexity is that we're cycling nutrients. So nutrients can be in many different chemical forms. For example, in our soils, in Atsas, which is an upper pillow lava classic rock of Troodos, we have iron deficiencies in pomegranate, for example. We not lacking iron into the soil. There's actually iron into the soil, but it's in a chemical form that the pomegranate cannot have. So we have iron deficiencies, but tons of iron into our soil. But it happens that some plants, pioneer plants usually, spiky weeds, things that grow in really, really difficult situation, like the thistle, you know, the aguinares, the wild aguinares. This one can. So if I take this guy, which has the possibility of taking the iron, which is in a chemical form that a more sophisticated plant like a pomegranate cannot take, I can compost this guy, and through the biology, cycle the nutriment and give it to the pomegranate. So the more biology we have, the more we can do nutrient cycle. Nutrient retention is the same. We are not leaking anything into the aquifer. All our nutriments, all our nitrogen, all our micronutrients are staying into our soil. And slowly, slowly, because we're holding water, we're actually replenishing the aquifer without the pollution. The aquifer pollution, it's a huge, huge issue. In traditional farming, we use chemicals, nitrates, NPK, and all those leak into our waters. And then we pump it back, and then we drink it, and then we put it into our soil. So in that way, we're cycling pollution. With a healthy, organic, complex, diverse soil, we're doing the opposite. We can fix pollution problems. Of course, we improve the structure, the infiltration, and the water holding capacity. We have a balance, so we don't have any issues with disease. We have plants that have a better immune system, that have access to all the micronutrients that it needs to defend itself. And we can degrade polluant. We have a phytoremediation for pretty much every pollution on the planet, even radioactivity. There's fungus that can fix radioactive grounds. So through biology, we can fix polluted areas. So what we're trying to do really in Atsas is that we don't really grow the trees, we're trying to grow the soil. And then the trees will find their way. And for that, there's basic ingredients, is the minerals that we have into our soils, the air, the water, the living biology in the soil. So all those, worms, soil microbe, etc. And living organism on the soil, plants, animals, etc. And we have a minimum disturbance regime. For soil to form, it needs to be living. We need microorganisms, we need biology. And to be living, it needs to be covered. When you see all these fields that are tilled everywhere in Cyprus today, what's happening is that they are cooking in the soil. Whatever is living in there is cooked. The soil changed its chemical form. It's becoming hydrophobic. So the first rain next winter will take much of it out. And of course, before that, the wind through the erosion. So because we don't know much about soil biology, we know the basics. We know very little about what those bacteria, fungi, nematode, protozoa, and all this are doing. We're basing ourselves on principles. So what we're looking is the maximum number of soil organisms, the maximum diversity, and that drives our soil function, and that creates our soil structure, moisture, and fertility. So this is where we are in Cyprus, behind the Bay of Morphu. We are in a rain shadow because of the mountain of Pendedactyla and Troodos. So we have the lowest rainfall in Cyprus, which is around 200 millimeters a year when we're lucky. This year we had 70. So it's a very dry year. This is before we arrived. So you see a typical, what I call a desert pattern. And what you see is what we see in desert is those patterns that we call dendritic patterns that look like veins. And if you fly over a desert, this is always what you will see. So what we looked at is how can we work with those veins, which are basically erosion gullies. So the first thing we did is to try to catch as much water as we can for our irrigation, because we need to water things so they can grow. We are a commercial operation. We can't, wait many years for the olive to grow. We want them to grow as fast as possible. So we placed a dam in one of these erosion gully, actually the biggest one. And this dam is catching water from all the land above, and all this is slopes. And you see everything here is tilled. This is not suitable for farming. This is just mountains and rocks. This is tilled just for subsidized. No wheat, no barley, nothing is planted here. So to our advantage is that when it rains on those rocks now, because basically this is basically desert, all the water gather and comes down to our lake. We are in the UN buffer zone, which has many advantages. Since 1974, no agriculture. So we have a healthy population of birds and bugs, which is a huge advantage for us. We never had the olive fly there. On other land under our management, we do have olive fly, but in this place, we never had olive fly, because the few olives that are around are wild and were never affected. So that's a huge advantage for us. And maybe the reason is that we have many predators of the olive flies as well, because our insect population is very healthy and our bird population is very healthy. We are in an important bird area. This is what we're working on. Pretty much no topsoil. And this very funny rock, which is the upper pillow lava of Troodos. You see, it's very red. That's iron oxide, so it's full of iron. But not in a form which is available for sophisticated plant. So all the trees were planted with a drill. In between the olives, in the oldest piece of land, we had planted aromatics, and we are doing selective grass cutting. That means we are selective on the plants we want into our system, and we not cut those ones so they can reproduce. One of those is the Dendritic viscosa, which is called Konisos here in Cyprus, which is basically the main habitat for this guy, which is a parasitic wasp, which is the main predator of the olive fly. So what we're trying to do is to have an integrated pest management system where we have a balance into our system, where our pests are taken care of naturally through their predators. We're starting having mushrooms growing on the rocks, thanks to the organic matter that we keep adding. We use organic fertilizer on the young trees and a mix of manure, aged manure and composted manure on the oldest trees. What we did when we arrived and before we planted, we collected all the stones from the land because we wanted to be able to cut the grass. And the only reason we cut the grass is for fire risk in the summer. And we're stacking up these stones in places to slow down the water, to create habitat for birds, snakes, insects. And we place them, that is what we call a check dam, in places where we have a huge erosion gullies, where the water runs off very fast in the rainy season. The result is that this picture is taking a year old, and this is after 4 months of no rain, and we still had growth, and we still have green places. And of course, behind those check dams, we are creating soil, we are creating topsoil, because when you have water, you have growth, and when you have growth, you have sequestration of carbon, organic matter, and that's basically creating soil. So in nature, in that environment, it will take about 500 years to grow 0.5 centimeter of topsoil, and here we did it in 3 years. Also, when we just change a little bit the environment, because everything gardens, just stacking up stones will change the local environment at that specific place. What happens here is that in the morning the birds will come up, warm up on the stone, perch there, have their morning poo, and most of the seeds that are spread into a desertic environment like this one are spread through the digestive system of a bird. So what we have there is a way to spread natural plants, and especially this one, which is a wild asparagus, which is a delicacy here in Cyprus and a very expensive one. And we're starting seeing now lots of wild asparagus growing everywhere we had stacked stones, and that will eventually, become one of our products. So the water, instead of running fast and creating more erosion, is slowed down and sinks into the ground, okay, where we want it to be. And for those who are coming tomorrow, we're going to walk there. This is what was taken a year ago, and you will see the difference. You can't see the stones anymore. Everything is fully grown. The trees have grown much faster. There's lots of insects, rabbits, foxes, animals, and all sorts of microorganisms in there. We haven't touched the existing. In that desertic landscape, the only thing pretty much which is growing is the Cratageus acerola, which is a moss-fila tree, and this plant, which is a Sisyphus lotus, very spiky plant. And this one is a pioneer plant. It has the capacity of going really deep into the ground and bring water up. And by doing so, it creates what we call a hydraulic redistribution, where many other plants can grow within that plant. So it's a mini ecosystem. So we don't want to touch that because it's very useful for us. It's full of life. This is where the birds will nest. This is where most of our animals will live. And so we are just working with it. This is a year-old tree, and you will see tomorrow how big they are now in the second year. And so within that spiky bush, we have other plants growing thanks to the redistribution, the transpiration, and the shade of these plants. Same here, we planted pomegranates right into the rocks, in between of whatever was growing there, which is basically wild thyme here. We do not till. We are just making a little hole, planting the plants there, adding the organic matter we want to, and things are growing really fine. We left the wild capers. So this is the lake from above. The water is coming from the land above, from the roads, from this road, from all the buildings. it goes inside this silt pond, so the soil is collected here, and then it overflows into the lake. This was designed to be twice the size of the kupa of the tractor. How do you say kupa? The thing that collects things. The scoop, yeah, of the tractor with a gentle slope. So in the summer, after the rain, we collect the soil of our neighbors, and we can use that for potting mix, or to put in different places that we want to. When it comes to ground cover, we noticed last year this little plant, which is Medicago scutellata, which is basically the same family than alfalfa, Triphylia. And this little plant grows with no irrigation. We found 15 plants, 15 little bushes last year. And this plant has the capacity of fixing the nitrogen from the air. The air that we breathe, 80% of it is nitrogen. And the main element which is needed for plant growth is nitrogen. This plant can farm the air, take the nitrogen from the air, and store it into the root system. And if it gets cut or eaten by an animal, it releases nitrogen into the soil. So this plant is improving our soil for free, and it's growing with no irrigation. So what we did last year is those 15 plants, we didn't cut them. We identified them, we went very, very carefully, we didn't cut them. And now, this year, it starts spreading. And now I think we're around 8 to 10% of the ground cover in 1 year of this little plant. So slowly, slowly, we want to have a maximum of those nitrogen-fixing plants from the Fabaceae family to fix nitrogen for us into the soil. So when it comes to the olive oil, the reason why we have such high concentration of polyphenol into our olive oil is, of course, the geology, the temperature, the way we're watering trees, and also the way we're collecting the olives. We're collecting really fast, and we're milling within half an hour. So we have no oxidation, and we can retain the best quality possible. But the main reason really behind it is that the tree has access to all the nutriment, or most of the nutriment it needs to create those phenols. And all this with a very small machinery. This is our little tractor. It's a Ferrari, Gianni Ferrari. It does every job we need on the land, and it could be used more. It could be used on more land. We don't use it every day. He has a thing to cut the grass. He has a thing to drill the holes to plant the trees. He has a thing to make trenches to bury the irrigation. He has the pallet for the factory, for the bottles and all this. He has a little fork that we made to turn the compost, to turn the olive pomace, all this. He has the scoop, the kupa, we can put on it. We could also put a shredder on it. Basically all the jobs that we need on the farm are done with a tiny little tractor. We don't need huge machinery. We don't need to spend hundreds of thousands in tractors and machineries and all this. One tiny little tractor. And to be honest, we could have twice the size of the farm and still have only the need for that tractor. And the next step, bringing animals into the system. So we've been looking into what kind of animals, what animals we can manage into our system. We need grazing. It will speed up our system. If we cut the grass and let the grass, fall onto the ground and we leave it like this, it will degrade. It will bring biology, but at a much slower rate than if it was eaten by an animal and put on the ground. So what we want to do is we want to biomimic the way animals are grazing in nature. which is basically really fast in compact herds. And now with the modern electric fencing, it's very easy. So we looked at the breed of cow, because cow has the most complex biology, much more complex than goats and sheep. Also, they don't eat olive trees. If we put goats there, it might be difficult to manage. This cow is actually not a breed of cow. It's a wild cow, but which has been domesticated for thousands of years. It's the oldest domestication of cow in the world. They're found all over the world now, but they're originally from South India, from Kerala. They are very, very tolerant to heat. They can live in desert, no problem. They are very rustic. They don't have disease. They don't need vaccination. They don't need any of this. They can feed on very, very little food. And they produce an amazing fatty milk. And with this fatty milk, you can make amazing mozzarella, for example. Like in Puglia in Italy, they have the same family of cow, which is basically a zebu. And so this will be the next step. We were thinking to do it in year 8. That was the plan originally. It might happen much faster because the trees are growing much faster than expected. So as soon as the trees can handle the cows, we will have electric fencing and a certain amount of them, and we will move them quickly into the landscape, milk them, and make amazing cheese. And while doing this, if we manage to get the ground cover we want by then, we will fix the nitrogen from the air through our ground cover. We will have the cows eating that, which is very, very nutritious food, making amazing milk. The cow manure plus the nitrogen of the plants will be enough as a fertilizing. So once we have our animals into the system, we don't need to cut the grass every year, so that's one jump down. We don't need to bring fertilizer, compost, manure, whatever we give to the trees. That's another job, and it's another input, that's another cost. So our ideal is to create a farm which is a closed ecosystem, which is a complete circular system with zero inputs. So slowly, as our system matures, we're reaching towards that. And of course, while we're doing this, we're creating soil, we're fixing the world's problem, with climate change. We are storing the carbon. We are storing water into our landscape. We're rehydrating our landscape, so we have potentially an effect on the local rain patterns. And we are creating a product which is a cheaper, better alternative to many synthetic medicines. So, it's all benefit. It's good for the environment, it's good for the people, it's good for the future, it's good for that little guy, so he can actually have a future. And this is not difficult. It's basically working with nature, understanding nature, and speeding up the process so it works for our advantage. And this vision of, I'm going to make it very short now, this vision as a circular system, it's a vision that we can extrapolate to other activities, other economical activities. And that's what we call the circular economy. And this is also, I believe, one of the only way that we can survive as a species is that if we change the way we produce things and the way we consume things. If, I have this Samsung phone, I own this phone. There's not really reason for me to own that phone. I just want the service of it. Samsung bought aluminium, copper, and all those very rare metal that we find in part per million into the ground. The mining for all this new technology. It's a huge impact on the climate change. It's a huge creating, CO2 emissions and all this. I don't need to own this because, if I'm lucky in 1 year, I will change it, and that will end up into the landfill. It's not really recyclable. It's not built to be recyclable. The battery cannot be changed. It's built to last a short period of time and to be thrown away, like everything else. If I buy a washing machine, I know that 1 month after the warranty, after 5 years, it will break down. And I can't fix it because all the engine is melted into plastic. It's casted in, so it's not fixable. So if I produce washing machine, I buy aluminum, copper, and all these things at 2018 price. I make my washing machine, sell it to you, and in 5 years' time, it's going to end up in the landfill. If we're lucky, if we live in Europe, in good places and all this, some of the metal will be recycled in a non-very effective way. But if instead of selling you a washing machine, I was renting you a washing machine, I will be owning the washing machine. I will be using copper, aluminum, all the materials at the price of 2018. So I will not be subject to raise and downs, and mainly up when it comes to resources. And I will hold these resources at at 2018 price. Then I will design it in a way which will last. We forget about the programmed obsolescence, which is done in every piece of equipment we have. I will make it so I can fix it, and you will pay me, every month for the service of a washing machine. There's no reason for us to own things that, we don't need to own. What we do need to have is to rent services, and the company needs to own the materials. We don't need to own, I don't need to own, selenium, aluminum, and all these things. So if we were changing our mode of production from a linear perspective, which is, I extract, I produce, I sell, I throw, to a system which is circular, which is also biomimicry. This is how it works in nature. There's no waste in nature. Waste is complete stupidity, and it's a human stupidity. If we were working just like nature, we won't create waste. We will lower our pollution, we will lower our emissions, and we can all live really happily in an economical system that will be sustainable. So solutions are simple, really, really, really simple. When it comes to agriculture, there's no rocket science. All we need is knowledge. Agriculture is knowledge-based. All we need is training. We don't need subsidized. We don't need big tractors. We don't need any of this. We just need education. So there's hope. There's hope. But we have to get all the resources we need to restore our ecosystems, and we have to do it fast. And we have to engage those little guys to do it, and they want to do it. The young generation want to do it. And we can provide really good, healthy lifestyle. We need farmers. We can't have only 1% of the population feeding the 99% of the population, because now the population of farmers is 1%. We need way more farmers. We need smaller farms, more effective, more productive, and they can be a tool to reverse climate change, and they can be a tool to create sustainable economies. They can be a tool to create new medicines, because all the medicines we need, I believe, are in nature. We just need to find a way to extract them and to have them in the right way. And with olive oil, we've seen the potential of oleocanthal and other polyphenols. And we didn't use any rocket science to reach those levels. It's a soil biology. So it's not that difficult. We just have to do it. And yeah, we can solve all the world's problem in the garden. It's easy. Thank you.